Hey everyone! In this video I'm going to talk about reproducible research with R Markdown and knitr. And specifically I'm going to get you up to speed to get started with your first assignment. So as you know, all of the assignments, your weekly assignments that you'll have to submit have to be completed in R Markdown and ideally directly in our Studio Cloud. And the reason why I want you to use R Markdown right from the start is that it's an incredibly useful tool that I hope you will also kind of learn to appreciate and then learn to use or adopt further, like down the line in other classes when you work on papers and things like that. Why is R Markdown so useful? R Markdown is so useful because it provides a framework for researchers to create documents and report their results of their analysis in a directly reproducible way. The way R Markdown allows this is that basically what it's doing, it's designed to integrate both the plain text documentation of a data analysis, so whatever descriptions and discussions and things like that you have, with the execution of the actual analysis. So the actual code will be embedded in your text document. And so ultimately what this means for you as you're working, for example, on these assignments, you don't have to write a separate file, you don't have to have a separate, code document and write your paper in a Word document and then the code separately and pasting the results from from R into your Word document. Rather than doing that, R Markdown basically allows you to write down the R code that will produce the output that you want directly within your document. And on the one hand, this has advantages for reproducibility, but on the other hand, this also has advantages in the sense that as soon as you make small changes in your analysis, in tables or in figures that you create, this will directly be automatically represented in the document that you compile, and you don't have to, kind of go back and copy and paste the table that you created by hand one time. Now something changed and now you have to update that entire table and go through all those manual steps again. All of that is going to be automated and directly part of your document, right? If you want some more kind of underlying motivation, again, if you haven't already, check out the Plain Person's Guide to Plain Text Social Science. That was the required reading for last week, which also talks about the importance of reproducibility and how R Markdown and knitr can help kind of facilitate that. Also, to get you up to speed and get started, there's a great introduction into how R Markdown works and how you can set it up in RStudio as well as RStudio Cloud. You can just follow that link. I also included that link on Canvas itself. Maybe I'll just show you real quick how that looks. If we click on that link, you'll see an introduction that gives you an overview of how these code chunks work and how basic formatting works in R Markdown. So definitely give that a read as well to directly get you started. Also, make sure to check out the cheat sheets that I posted on Canvas that kind of, once you have an overview and know kind of the underlying structure and how it works, you can always refer to those cheat sheets to kind of remind or to check how certain commands work and things like that. So I think, let's see. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say in terms of the slides. What I'm going to do now is I will exit these and switch directly to RStudio Cloud. Oh, this was our previous slides. And I will directly show you how to kind of set up an R Markdown document using our first problem set. The problem set is accessible on Canvas, of course, but I also included it here in R Studio Cloud. You can directly access it by clicking on that PS1 link in our shared workspace. And hopefully this now won't take too long to open this project. Let's see. Looks like it's getting there. All right. There we go. All right. So a couple of things to note in this project. The first thing is that we have in our data viewer or working directory viewer, we have the problem set itself as a PDF, so you can read that right away. See the different problems. This is one of the problems in the EMI book in the first chapter. And but what I also included is the R Markdown file that created this document itself. So you have a first sample of how an R Markdown file looks like by basically just opening this ps1.rmd for R Markdown. And you'll see directly here on the left side, we'll see the problem set itself opened. Okay, so you can give that a look, but maybe I'll go through the structure in by opening a new R Markdown file. All right, so now if you want to start working on this problem set, what I recommend you to do is to create a new file up here on the upper left, and we want to create a new R Markdown document. All right. And then we will see a little window that asks us for some default settings. We can put in the title. This is now going to be problem set 1. Author. Oops, I can't spell my own name. And then we want our default output format. In our case, we can have different types of formats. We can have an HTML output, a PDF, or Word. We want to work with a PDF because ultimately on Canvas you have to submit a PDF document. Okay. Then we click OK. And we directly see our new R Markdown file. Okay, there are a couple of things here. We're going to go through these in a second. Before we can actually compile this document, we have to actually save it in our working directory. So the first thing we want to do is just save this, and then it will ask us to give this R Markdown document a file name. I'm going to call this PS1. And then maybe craft.rmd. So this is my submission for the first problem set. I'm going to save this. And now we see an additional R Markdown file down here, ps1_craft. Okay. Now, if we want to compile this, this is already an R Markdown file that you can directly compile and directly see what is in there. There is a couple of things to note. One is that we have this header information right at the top, which kind of just defines a certain set of defaults and kind of meta information for the document. We have here the title and the author that we put in earlier in this window. We have the date, 9/15, so that's today, September 15th. We can also change this. For example, we might want to change this to the submission date. So that would be let's see, I think it would be the 22nd if I remember correctly. Yes, a week from now. And the output is a PDF document. And for now, we can just leave that as is. We have a couple of internal options here that we, for now, we can just leave like this as well. You can basically set whether you want to include the R code or just want to show the output and not include the R code. But for your submissions, I want you to always include the code as well as the output. So for now, this default is just fine. And then we have two sections. And maybe let me just compile this right away. And then I can show you exactly what this looks like. In order to compile this, we can do two different things. We can either just click this knit button up here. If I click this, it'll take some moments and some things appear. And then we have a PDF file that looks like this, okay? And as we can see, there's already some sample code and plots that are included that are actually in here to kind of give you an example of how certain, how the functionality ultimately works. If we compare what is appearing in the PDF to what is in our original R Markdown file, we see, we see a couple of interesting things. We have two sections with section headings, R Markdown and including plots. As you can see here on the left, section headings begin with a number of pound signs. So there can be kind of a hierarchy of sections. So the top level section would be 1 pound sign, medium level section would be 2 pound signs, and then lower level 3 pound signs. And so here it's just medium level 2 pound signs for a smaller section heading, so to speak. And then we can directly write our text. If we want to include a link, for example, we can just include it like this in these brackets. If we want to have something printed as bold, we just include it with 2 stars. If we want something as like in italics, we can just include 1 star around the around the word. If I compile this now again, you can, as I said, you can click this button to compile. You can also press Control-Shift-K, and it will directly compile. And you'll see now here, document. Document is now the word is in italics. And so these are kind of basic basic layouting functions or ways to change the layout and change fonts and things like that in our Markdown. But the important thing is further down. The important thing is to include R code and R code chunks in your R Markdown document. In order to include a chunk of code, what we need first is these 3 kind of quotation marks, and then the curly brackets, and then we need to specify that this is going to be a chunk of R code, and this will begin the R code section, and then we can close it again with these 3 quotation marks. And so anything in between those 2 kind of sets or apostrophes or will be interpreted as R code and will be directly run, right? So if we include like 2 + 2, or whatever other command we can think of, and we directly compile this. we'll now see that if I compile this again, now we have 2 plus 2 and the result of 4 included in our Markdown, in our PDF, okay? We can also directly include plots. So in this case here, we have plot pressure. We'll talk about plotting functions later on, and you won't need to plot for the first assignment. But as you can see in this example, it's also straightforward to embed plots in an R Markdown file. Okay, and also note here that it's directly described. The echo equals false parameter that is included in this R code chunk declaration. Basically, the effect that it has, it prevents printing the R code that generated the plot. Okay. In our case, however, we don't want to include this because we always want to include our the R code that generated that plot. Okay. So as you can see, this kind of default R Markdown file directly gives you a broad, like quick overview of the kind of type of kind of basic structure of an R Markdown document. And if you then want to kind of start working on your problem set, you can just, delete all of this and then say, okay, let's start with question 1. And then, maybe I want to copy question 1 in my response. So I'm just going to go to this other Markdown file, which already contains the question. And it says, okay, question 1 says, load the data into R and check the dimensions of the data. Also obtain a summary of the data, and so on. Okay, so how are we going to do this? If we want to include a new chunk of our code, again, we have to use these apostrophes or quotation marks. But ultimately, the shortcut to do this is Control Shift. Oh no, sorry, that was the wrong. Where is my mouse? Control Alt I. If we press Control Alt I, we directly kind of see this insert this chunk, and we can directly start writing some R code. So in this problem set, we see we have a data set which is called turnout.csv. This data set is in our data folder. So if we want to, oops, this is not the, so if we want to load this data set, we can, for example, give this data frame our the name df, or we could, for example, call it turnout, and then we want to use the read.csv command, and then we want to open the file that is in the data folder, and we want to open turnout.csv. All right, and if we do this, it'll directly open this data frame, and now we see in our environment turnout 14 observations, 9 variables. We can also look at that data frame right away by calling it now. Oops. And we'll see, we'll have the voting eligible population and so on, according to the ANES, across years. All right, so that's kind of to get you started. I will not continue because the remainder of the problem set is, of course, your assignment. But this should get you started, and it might get some time. You need some time to get used to using this, but overall, going forward, you'll realize that working on these assignments on a weekly basis will be much more efficient if you directly do it in RStudio Cloud. And the other advantage, or using our Markdown, and the other advantage of using it in RStudio Cloud is that whenever you have trouble or problem, you can send me an email and I can directly look at your code and run it and tell you exactly what a problem might be. Lastly, I mentioned it before, but I just want to emphasize again, as you get started working with RStudio Cloud and specifically our Markdown, I have cheat sheets that are available on Canvas, and specifically for our Markdown, if you open this cheat sheet, you'll have a little PDF that opens up. And hopefully, if that doesn't take too long now to load, then you will see that this provides kind of a brief overview of kind of the things that I told you, some information on how exactly this R Markdown file looks like, but it will also give you some additional kind of information of what specific kind of plain text syntax in our Markdown will result in your PDF. Okay. All right. I think this is all for our Markdown for now. I hope this is enough of an introduction for you to get started with your assignment. Again, check out that RStudio introduction as well. It gives you a broader overview. And again, if you have any questions, you send me an email or post it on our Canvas discussion board. All right. The last video will be about additional resources and how to use Swirl and QSS Learn R.